Muli po mga kapatid, nais po namin kayo batiin ng Shalom and Storge. Dalawang salita po na kapag translate sa wikang Ingles, ang ibig pong sabihin ay peace and love. And we mean it po. Tuwing aming sinasabi na nasaan man po kayo, wherever you are, may the peace that comes from God's Holy Spirit. Yung kapayapaan po na tanging galing lamang sa kanyang banal na Espiritu ay maranasan ninyo. Kung kayo po ay sumusubaybay sa actual live stream or maaari po kasama po namin kayo ngayon sa actual service o di kaya po kayo po ay team replays, may the peace of God be with all of you. At sa ating lahat po, dahil tayong lahat po ay mga anak ng Diyos, storge, brotherly and sisterly love to every single one of us. At bago po natin pag-aaralan yung mismong kabanata ng aklat ni Josue, but di po natin gawin po ang isang brief run-through of the series that we've already done as we look into stories in the Old Testament. At nagsimula po tayo kay Abraham. And alam naman po natin na si Abraham po ay nakatira sa kanyang lugar sa Haran, ngunit tinawagan siya ni Lord at sinabi niya na, I will take you to a place that you are not sure of. Dadalhin kita sa isang lugar na hindi mo alam, pero I will be with you. May guarantee po that God will be with Abraham at umuon naman po siya. But with saying yes to that, it also came po with its fair share of ups and downs. Na kahit po nag-promise si God kay Abraham na magkakaroon siya ng descendants as numerous as the sand on the seashore, o di kaya po mga bituin sa langit, the stars in the sky. Sa dami po nun, that was the promise that God gave them, but along the way, nainip din po sila ng asawa niyang si Sarah, kaya nagkaroon po siya ng idea at sinuggest kay Abraham na, ba't di mo pakasalan ng ating kasambahay na taga-Egypt at ang pangalan nito ay si Hagar. At kung magkakaanak po sila, which they did, kaya po nagkaroon si Abraham ng anak na si Ishmael, yun po sana ang magiging promised child nila. But evidently, hindi po ganun ang nais mangyari ni Lord. Sapagkat ang nais ni Lord ay ma-carry out yung promise na yan through Abraham's child with Sarah herself. Kaya po, we were introduced to Isaac. And as it turns out, the promise was really fulfilled, at evidently, Isaac found himself marrying a woman named Rebecca. At sa kasal na yan, nagkaroon po sila ng dalawang anak na kambal na lalaki at ang pangalan nila ay si Jacob at si Esau. And that started God's promise. However, yung mga chosen people of God, yung mga Israelites, they found themselves in Egypt in a time wherein si Faraon, yung Pharaoh na hindi nakakakilala kay Lord, naging masama yung pagtrato niya sa mga Israelites na nakatira dun sa Egypt. Which is why another character had to stand up and take the responsibility of leading God's people out of Egypt, at yun po ay si Moses. And from there, we can see that indeed, after reasoning with Pharaoh, napapayag nga to let God's people, God was saying, let my people go, and after a series of plagues, 10 plagues for that matter, pumayag naman po si Faraon na pakawalan yung mga Israelita na nakatira sa Ehipto during that time. But as they exited Egypt, it also came to a time when God said, hindi kay Moses magfo-fall ang paglilid sa mga Israelites into Egypt. Which is why the leadership now had to be passed on to a next generation leader by the name of Joshua, or si Josue po, sa ating pagkakakilala sa Tagalog translation ng scriptures. At last week po, kung nasundan po ninyo yung service, we've already started to look into the first chapter, sa unang kabanata. And now, we will be looking into the second chapter of Joshua. However, ang pamagat po ng pangalawang kabanata ay Rahab hides the spies. But yes, it's Joshua chapter 2. That is the title po na binigay ng New Living Translation. Pero I highly suggest po na sundan nyo din po ako sa mga Bibles na meron po kayo ngayong araw. So as we are prepared, let's look into the passage. Joshua chapter 2, Rahab hides the spies. So then Joshua secretly sent out 2 spies from the Israelite camp at Acacia Grove. He instructed them, scout out the land on the river, on the other side of the Jordan River, especially around Jericho. So, makikita po natin dito that the promised land is near and they are now under the leadership of Joshua. Pero, ang ginawa po ni Joshua is to send out 2 spies to do what? So the men set out and came to the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there that night. So as you could see po rito, so they already saw that God has promised them the land, kaya nagpadala po si Joshua ng 2 espiya, and the moment they entered into the territory, they stayed in the house of a prostitute named Rahab. Now, before we go even further, ba't di po natin tingnan yung profile ni Rahab, as you could see here. Her name actually po means arrogance or pride. O di kaya po, sabi po ng isang commentary, storm or bagyo. Now, I know what you're probably thinking, especially kapag ka Marvel fans po kayo, but no, this is not the X-Men character. They share a name, pero magkaiba po sila. No? Nevertheless, gayon pa man, ang ibig pong sabihin ng pangalang Rahab ay ito, kayabangan at bagyo. Ngunit sa kabila po ng mga ganyang kaakibat na ibig sabihin ng kanyang pangalan, she actually has some good attributes because she is clever and she is wise, maabilidad, resourceful, meron siyang karunungan. Bakit? Sapagkat she was able to see God's judgment coming to the land the moment that the 2 spies went in, as we have read already in the first verse. Kaya po, let's continue. But someone told the king of Jericho, some Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. May nag-leak po actually sa king na nagsabi, so the king of Jericho sent orders to Rahab, bring out the men who have come into your house, for they have come here to spy out the whole land, as we can see po in the 2nd and 3rd verses. So, yan po, nakarating po yung balita sa king ng Jericho during that time na, sir, bossing, may mga espiya na nakapasok rito at alam na natin kung anong pwede mangyari. Gusto nilang muli take over ang land na ito. So, ano ngayon po ang naging pasya ng king? Nagpadala siya ng request ng mga guards niya kay Rahab na ilabas mo yung 2 spies na yan. But, it gets interesting sapagkat ito po yung sinabi ni Rahab sa verse 4. Rahab had hidden the 2 men in her house, but she replied, yes, the men were here earlier, but I didn't know where they were from. They left the town at dusk as the gates were about to close. I don't know where they went. Sabi po niya, di ko alam kung saan po sila pumunta. Nandito sila kanina, pero umalis din sila agad-agad. If you hurry, you can probably catch up with them. But as we can see po in verse 6, actually, she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them beneath bundles of flax she had laid out, which we can see po rito. Tinago niya po sa ilalim ng tinatawag na flax. Pero sa ating po mga Pinoy, kung titingnan po natin yung picture, it looks like palay, hay, di ba po? Tinago niya po doon. Of course, sinabihan niya po doon na huwag na lang po kayo maingay ha. Pero sasabihin ko dito sa mga gwardiya na naghahanap sa inyo na nanggaling kayo dito pero umalis din kayo. As we could see here in the 6th verse. So, the king's men, verse 7, went looking for the spies along the road leading to the shallow crossings of the Jordan River. And as soon as the king's men had left, the gate of Jericho was shut. So, we could see po, tinago po sila ni Rahab dito sa ilalim ng flax. Flax po yung term na gamit. At sinabi niya na sa mga guards na ganap, kung pupunta kayo dito, baka mahanap niyo pa po sila. So, wow. A woman whose name means, or ang pangalan niya po ay, hindi po kaaya-aya yung maibig sabihin. Meron din pala siyang clever and wise judgment to tell that these men should be spared. At hindi po dapat sila ibisto sa hari at sa mga gwardyang naghahanap sa kanila. It goes on actually sa verse 8. Before the spies went to sleep that night, as we could see here, Rahab went up on the roof to talk with them. At sabi po niya, I know the Lord has given you this land. As we could see now in this next picture. At ang sabi pa, she told them, we are all afraid of you. Everyone in the land is living in terror. For we have heard how the Lord has made a dry path for you through the Red Sea when you left Egypt. And we know what you did to Sihon and Og, the two Amorite kings east of the Jordan River, whose people you completely destroyed. No wonder our hearts have melted in fear. No one has the courage to fight after hearing such things, for the Lord your God is the supreme God of the heavens above and the earth below. So we could see po rito mga kapatid na from the first verse all the way down po hanggang sa 11th verse that testimony is a key. Mahalagang bagay ang testimony. Kung babalikan po actually natin yung verse 10 as it says here or 9, sabi po sa verse 10, we have heard how the Lord made a dry path for you through the Red Sea when you left Egypt. Nakarating po actually yung balita na yan kasi po ganyan po ka-grand, ganyan po ka-grabe yung nagawa ni Lord na even to a far land like Jericho during that time, nakarating po yung miracle na yan ni Lord. Which is why po, testimony is a key. Mahalagang bagay po ang mga testimony kasi kung papansinin niyo po, di ba po, parang hindi pa nga po nag-start magsalita yung mga spies, pagpasok nila, pero nalaman agad ng mga taga Jericho, including Rahab herself, na, uy, may nakapasok. No? So, syempre po, yung mga residents of that place, hindi pwedeng makuha nila yung land na ito sa atin. Pero si Rahab po, because she knew that God was siding with them, nakita niya po na, dapat i-spare tong mga taong ito. The fact po na hinati ni God yung dagat para sa kanila, ibig sabihin, God is on their side. And because she's clever and wise, she chose to also side with them, beginning by hiding them. Mula po sa pagtago sa kanila sa ilalim ng mga palay or mga flax na ito. No? Testimony is key po mga kapatid. And as believers, I think you and I would all agree na there are two ways po to say itong phrase na yan ang Christian. No? Una po ay, yan ang Christian? Question mark. No? Ba't ganyan ang pag-uugali niya? Parang hindi yata akma sa pag-uugali ni Kristo nung nandito siya. Nagsasabi siya na sumusunod siya kay Christ, pero parang magkabaliktad yung ugali nila. That's the first way of saying that. Or, pwede po yung pangalawang way of saying that is, yan ang Christian. Kahit po sa kabila ng mga kaliwat kanang pagsubok, pinipili pa rin po niya na ipakita na nananahan si Christ sa puso niya. No? There are two ways to say this. And sa English translation, ganyan din po. That's what you call a Christian? Why is his behavior or his attitude like that? It seems quite contradictory to how Christ was when he was here. Or he claims to follow Christ, but it doesn't seem to match. Yun po yung unang way of saying that. Or, now that's what you call a Christian. That's the second way of saying it. And even though they go through numerous trials and struggles, they still choose to emulate Christ-like character. Kaya po mga kapatid, testimony is a key. Napakalaking halaga or napakalaking bagay po ng ating testimony. Because po minsan, hindi po sa pamamagitan ng mga salitang sinasabi natin or binibigkas natin, but through our actions, through the things that we demonstrate sa ating behavior. Doon lamang po nare-reflect si Christ. Which is evidently what Rahab may have seen aside from knowing of how God parted the Red Sea for the 2 spies. Testimony is key. Hindi lamang po sa mga nanonood ngayon or sa mga kabataan ko na isabihin yan, I'm even talking to myself. Testimony is what will sometimes speak for itself. Your example, if not the words that you say. Kaya po, dapat iniingatan din po yan from time to time. Also, as we continue the passage sa verse 12, ang sabi po ay ito. Now, swear to me by the Lord, no? So, nagsabi po si Rahab, that you will be kind to me and my family since I have helped you. Give me some guarantee that when Jericho is conquered, you will let me live along with my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all their families. As you could see po, Rahab was trying to ask the spies po na after ko po kayo tulungan, kung pwede naman po, favor naman, huwag niyo po kaming isama o idamay pag kinukuha na po ninyo ang Jericho. At not only that, sabi din po sa verse 14, pumayag naman din po pala yung mga spies. We offer our own lives as a guarantee for your safety. The men agreed. If you don't betray us, we will keep our promise and be kind to you when the Lord gives us the land. Sabi nga din po dito sa verse 15, makikita po natin, then, since Rahab's house was built into the town wall, she let them down by a rope through the window, which we can see po rito. Okay? So, pumayag po yung mga spies at nung tumakas na sila, bumaba po sila sa pader gamit nitong kulay pula na lubid. No? Sabi. Rahab went on to say, escape to the hill country, she told them. Hide there for 3 days from the men searching for you. Then, when they have returned, you can go on your way. Kung mapapansin niyo po, ang bahay ni Rahab is situated or nakapwesto po sa mismong wall ng Jericho. Tingnan po natin itong bird's eye view ng map na ito or ng litrato as we could see right now. Nagkataon po na ang bahay po ni Rahab ay nakapwesto within this segment of the wall which according to a certain commentary was essential in her business as a prostitute. She probably had a view not only of the city itself sa loob, nakikita niya po yung mga nagaganap dito sa loob at gayon din nakikita niya rin din po yung mga nagaganap sa labas. A view that gave her the perfect vantage point. Nagkaroon po siya ng reference kapag mayroong pumapasok na mga customers or mga dayo pagpasok nila sa Jericho, and it may have given her an edge to welcome guests during that time. So strategically po, nakapwesto po yung bahay ni Rahab dito para makita niya kung anong nagaganap po dito sa loob at ano din yung mga nangyayari sa labas, kung may bisita ba na dapat i-welcome or not. Sabi pa nga daw po, some cities had both an inner wall, as we could see po, and an outer wall for added protection. Ganun po yung pag-construct ng pader na yan sa Jericho para ma-ensure yung security. But as we read on, we will see the work of God here. Sapagkat, sabi din po sa verse 16, hindi niya lamang po pinayagan na makatakas yung mga spies na yan, pero she even showed them the way kung saan po sila pwedeng dumaan, saan sila pwedeng magtago para hindi naman po sila matatagpuan ng mga naghahanap sa kanila. Verse 17, before they left, the men told her, we will be bound by the oath we have taken only if you follow these instructions. Verse 18, when we come into the land, you must leave this scarlet rope hanging from the window through which you let us down. And evidently, as we keep on reading, yun nga po ang ginawa ni Rahab. Iniwan niya po na nakatali yung pulang lubid bilang indicator, marker Para pagpasok ng mga tao at they are taking the land, may mark sila na, wag dapat anuhin ito. Hindi dapat gibain yung bahay na ito or wasakin ng todo sapagkat tinulungan kami ng babaeng nakatira rito, as we can see. It goes on to say, when we come into the land, you must leave this scarlet rope hanging from the window through which you let us down. And all your family members, your father, mother, brothers, and all your relatives must be here inside the house. If they go out into the street and are killed, it will not be our fault. But if anyone lays a hand on people inside this house, we will accept the responsibility for their death. Parang pinaparating po nila kay Rahab na, okay, agree kami dyan sa iminumungkahi mo, sa favor na hinihingi mo sa amin. Pero siguraduhin mo na pag sinasalakay na namin yung Jericho, dapat nasa loob kayo para hindi sila masaktan o madamay. Kasi pag nagkataon na nasa labas sila at may nasaktan or may namatay, hindi namin kasalanan yun. Parang pinapaliwanag nila or kinaklaro nila kay Rahab that is how it will eventually turn out. Pagka nasa labas sila, nasaktan, nadamay, hindi nila kasalanan yun. Evidently, kita po yan sa verse 19. Verse 20, sabi, if you betray us, however, we are not bound by this oath in any way. I accept your terms, she replied. So, nagkaroon po ng agreement. And she sent them on their way, leaving the scarlet rope hanging from the window. Kaya po, that is the beginning of how God's chosen people were beginning to go into the promised land under the leadership of Joshua. I accept your terms. Sabi nga po sa verse 20, if you betray us, however, kapag nilik mo sa hari at sa mga naghahanap sa amin, yung napag-usapan natin, edi canceled, no? Baliwala lahat ng agreement natin. But thankfully, sabi ni Rahab sa verse 21, I accept your terms. At hindi lamang yun. Okay po, it sounds good. Agree naman po ako sa mga kondisyon ninyo. At hindi lamang yun. She sent them on their way at iniwan niya nga na nakatali yung pulang lubid sa bintana niya. The spies went up into the hill country and stayed there 3 days. The men who were chasing them searched everywhere along the road but they finally returned without any success. Dahil po sa tips ng pag-iwas na binigay din ni Rahab, nagtago yung dalawang spies at evidently hindi nga po sila nahanap nung mga guards na naghahanap or naghahunting sa kanila. Verse 23, then the 2 spies came down from the hill country, crossed the Jordan River, and reported to Joshua all that had happened to them. Verse 24, the Lord has given us the whole land, they said, for all the people in the land are terrified of us. So after po nilang magtago, hindi sila nahanap, pagbalik nila kay Joshua, good news ang pag-report nila doon. So you see pa mga kapatid, it actually begs the question na why would the spies think of hiding in a house like that of Rahab? Much more so, what was it that allowed God to use even someone like Rahab na hindi po kabilang sa mga chosen people of God? Unang-una po, makikita na po natin kanina na strategically nakapwesto po yung bahay ni Rahab dito sa mismong wall. Kaya makikita niya kung ano yung mga kaganapan dito sa side na to at ganun din, nakita niya rin din po yung outer area kaya naituro niya din sa mga spies na dyan kayo magtago para hindi kayo makita. At what makes this more interesting po mga kapatid, yung dimensions po ng pader na ito ay 30 feet long. 30 feet po yung haba, 8 feet wide, yung lawak, at 3.5 feet high. No? Kung titingnan po natin, hindi po kaya by human effort lamang na patumbahin ang pader na ito. But actually, no stone was large enough to protect the city of Jericho from the power of God through His people. Hindi po sa efforts ng mga tao ni God ang nagpabagsak, ngunit yung faith nila sa Panginoon, kaya po naitumba yung pader at evidently they were able to take possession of the land, as you can see po. Our second key point po mga kapatid is God uses whomever He wants. Hindi po choosy si God, contrary to popular belief. Most people in this day and age, as far as that is concerned, kaya po maraming ayaw sa Christianity. Kasi po ang palagi nilang rason is, i-choosy ang God nyo eh. Ba't kami didikit, kakampi, o mag-worship sa isang God na namimili naman pala? Mamaya paglapit namin sa Kanya, siya din ang magpupush away sa amin. But, here's a counter-argument. Why, of all people, would God choose to use a woman na ang pangalan po ay ibig sabihin ay arrogance or pride, kayabangan, o di kaya storm, bagyo? And whatever criticisms nga po we may have about Rahab's profession, sa kanyang hanap buhay bilang prostitute, look at that. She was still allowed to be used by God because God Himself po is not choosy. He uses whomever He wants. And because of that, evidently, God's people were able to make it to the promised land. And that's the story po of Rahab and how she hid the two spies. But before that, let's also get down to our last key point, which is be willing to be used by the Lord. Magpagamit kay Lord. Sapagkat po, yung efforts ni Rahab were even remembered even to New Testament scriptures, particularly po here sa Matthew chapter 1 verses 2 to 6a, at matatagpuan po ito sa New Testament Pinoy version. Sabi po, ito yung mga ancestors ni Jesus mula kay Abraham hanggang kay King David. Si Abraham, Isaac, Jacob na tatay ni Judah at ng kapatid niya, si Judah na tatay nila Perez at Zerah, nanay nila si Tamar, Hezron, Ram, Aminadab, Nashon, Salmon, Boaz, nanay niya si Rahab. Tingnan niyo po, natandaan si Rahab, may special mention siya dahil lamang po she used her cleverness, yung kanyang wisdom, yung karunungan para kumampi sa kila Joshua by hiding the two spies. Ganun po ka grabe yung remembrance na ginawa niya, na even to the point na sa New Testament binanggit siya. Nanay ni Boaz si Rahab. Tapos anak po ni Boaz si Obed kay Ruth. At mula doon kay Obed, kaya po nabuo si Jesse, and we all know, kung titingnan po natin yung family tree, or pwede pong tawaging genealogy ni Jesus, ancestor po ni Jesus si King David. Kaya po, hindi po actually choosy si God. No? And He is, if you are willing to be used by Him at magpagamit sa Kanya, just imagine how much of the will of God will pan out. At hindi lamang po sa aklat ng Mateo. It's also found in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 31. Ang sabi po, dahil sa faith, hindi napasama si Rahab sa mga taong pinatay dahil hindi sila sumunod sa Diyos kasi winelcome niya ang mga espiyang Israelite. Pansin niyo din po, di ba po may verse po sa New Testament na be welcoming to strangers because some of you may never know that you've already welcomed angels into your households. I don't know kung napansin niyo po, pero Rahab actually practiced that. Even though hindi niya kalahi yung mga yun, but she used her wisdom, she actually welcomed two individuals who will lead the way to her being saved pagpasok nila sa Jericho. Nila, meaning the chosen people of God under Joshua's leadership. James chapter 2 verse 25, ganun din sa prostitute na si Rahab, naging acceptable siya sa harap ng Diyos dahil sa mga ginawa niya nung pinatuloy niya ang mga espiyang Israelites at tinuruan niya sila ng ibang daan palabas. And that po, mga kapatid, is the second chapter of Joshua called Rahab Hides the Spies. And as we all say, May God bless the reading of His Word. And muli po, let's just run through it. We can learn that testimony is a key. Kung hindi po sa ating mga sinasabi o binibigkas, at least po sa ating halimbawa or example. Mahalagang bagay ang testimony. God uses whomever He wants. Hindi choosy si God sapagkat gumamit po siya ng babae na may ganito pong records. At hindi lamang po yun. Mapapansin niyo po, God actually has a special mention towards women in several parts of Scripture. And of all women, a woman like Rahab. And lastly, which is an application for us all, be willing to be used by the Lord. Magpagamit kay Lord. And I don't think that needs any further explanation. Kaya po mga kapatid, ang sarap po talaga maglingkod kay Lord sapagkat po lahat ng efforts natin ay sulit talaga. Sobrang worth it. Even though po the Apostle Paul had said that he has no need for what we have to offer, kaya lahat po ng mga nakamtan natin sa buhay, mga achievements, mga accolades natin, sa totoo lang po, kahit ang turing po ni Lord dyan ay mga maruruming basahan, dirty and filthy rags, He's still gracious enough to allow us to serve Him at mag-contribute to His plan, much like Rahab here. Kaya po ulitin ko po, ang sarap maglingkod sa Lord sapagkat napaka worth it, sobrang sulit ng efforts. And with that po, Soli Deo Gloria, may God's Word be remembered, studied, and appreciated always and always. Maraming salamat po mga kapatid. God bless po sa atin.